Hey, folks, welcome back to the Utah County Republican Party podcast. I'm the vice chair and the podcast host, and we are here with a few folks. You probably recognize these faces. I'm just going to start to my left, and we'll work our way through. We have Wendy Hart. She is our volunteers officer on the steering committee for the county party. We also have Christy Henshaw, who is the party chair, and we have Max Sims, who is one of our House District chairs, and he's also the tech officer for the state party. And so we're going to be talking about Caucus and Convention and kind of do a little bit of a redux on what's gone on since we're, 5 days past the primary election. And so as we dive in, we kind of get a lot of the same questions, right? Mm-hmm. So it's, why do we need a caucus convention system, or, some other questions that are kind of similar to that. I think where we probably want to start is some of our convention winners didn't win, right? And so, we've seen a few people. We were at another meeting last night. Some people kind of asked the same question, and it is, well, if the primary gives us one set of candidates and the caucus convention system gives us a different set of candidates, then what's it all for? And I don't know which of you wants to start.
Yeah, I'll answer this one. I'm happy to answer this one. Is a lot of people kept asking that, is that if these do not end up the same, then that means that caucus and convention is invalid. And I had a great text thread with Kirby, and he said, I think people need to be asking the other question is, does that mean that the primary? But truly, when we go back and look, and Mac has some data for us today, the majority of a lot of people like to look at the big races. And so they look at those big races and then they don't look at the other races as much. If we're just going off of our convention winners, we did very well. And so I don't know if you want to take a look at some of that data.
Yeah, we can jump in the data. The data is where we can learn, where we can see, how can we do better as a party, and how do we, really accomplish the goal of the party, which is to see the principles of our platform and our shared values implemented into public policy, right? That's why we have elections. That's why we support Republican candidates. So as we looked at the data, we looked at a few different things to try and identify what are the biggest factors that really go into determining who has the high likelihood of winning a primary. And we looked at incumbency, and incumbency is kind of an interesting thing because it's a combination of kind of two sub pieces, which is name recognition, which is hugely important in races. People have to kind of know who they're voting for, and that ability to fundraise. And it affects that money piece of it as well. We also looked at specifically that money piece, how much money was spent from the beginning of the year through the 18th of the month, which was when the last reporting period was for our state races. And then also, were they on the ballot because they came out of convention as a nominee, or are they on the ballot solely because they gathered signatures? Mm-hmm. So those are the aspects of things that we looked at and kind of cross-compared to see what kind of bubbled up. And there were some very interesting things that came out of that.
Can I clarify one thing real quick,
sure,
Mac? Some people they signed up for both paths.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, you have people who collected signatures and came through the convention.
Yes.
So if somebody did both, are you just counting them as the convention winner?
They are a convention nominee.
Okay.
So as far as the party's concerned, they are a convention nominee,
okay,
regardless of whether they qualified for the ballot as well through signature gathering.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody understands.
Yes.
We're talking about the same terms.
And that's a good clarification.
And I wanted to say that if they go through the convention process that is run by the party, and the signature path is overseen by the state.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the big things that came out from that was spending was a big factor. Incumbency was a big factor. In fact, all the incumbents who were also the top spender in their race won, and that was 14 of them. So 14 incumbents who spent the most, they won their races. That's a pretty significant factor there. All the top spending convention winners won their primary as well, except for one. There was only one. So spending again was a big factor in that. But when we look at the signature gatherers, those that were in the primary because of their signature gathering only 40% of those top spending signature gatherers were the ones that won their primary. So even though they were on the ballot because of signature gathering and they spent a lot of money, that didn't necessarily equate to a win. So there's some interesting things there.
I interject? This is the question that I want to ask, because this is where we're in new territory. Is that the result of the party being able to help nominees?
That very well can be the case. I know that I think we really saw this round different than previous rounds where, the party really got the engine in place. There was a lot more effort in doing canvassing on part of candidates. I think there was a lot more money that was sent to candidates than there had been in the past. Not anywhere near the scale as, where monies came from other places. But there was more money available for candidates this round than there has been in the past. And I think that did make a difference. So
we're trying to look at that and see where we can figure out, because we had quite a few houses that got a little more engaged than other houses, and precincts that got a little more engaged than other precincts. And so we're going to try and see if things like canvassing, text messages in certain areas were able to help our nominees a little bit better.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
and once all the numbers come in, we get all the final, because really there are still some ballots that are being processed by some of our county clerks. Some of the races aren't completely finalized. We've actually seen one of the races in Utah, in Salt Lake County, that has actually flipped in the last day or two. That's not part of my analysis because those are county races. But once all those numbers come in, we have final numbers for all the races. One of the things we want to do is go back and do a precinct by precinct analysis and look at those precincts that had high coverage of canvassing by our volunteers, because we have some of that data, and do some comparisons like, okay, how did these specific precincts fare in specific elections compared to their neighbors that didn't have a lot of help from party volunteers to go do this kind of canvassing and stuff. And I think that will help bring some additional insight for us.
Yeah, I think though, just to kind of give a little bit of a preliminary answer to a part of this question, you said that 40% of the signature gatherers were successful versus 60% who weren't. And so, yeah, it looks like incumbency matters. It looks like outspending your competition matters.
Yes.
But it also seems that coming out of the convention matters.
Absolutely.
And it also tells me that, and you both foreshadowed this, and I think we're going to get into this more, but what the party can do for the candidates, can we make that so that it's 30% next time or 20% next time, right?
Sure.
And some of the ideas behind that. So, just a preliminary, does the convention system matter? Apparently it does.
It does. And so a couple more stats that kind of go along with that to mention is only 6 of the 24 candidates who qualified for the primary because of signature gathering actually won their primary.
6 of 24.
6 of 24. Yeah. So like if you look at the broad scope of things as far as signature gathering, they didn't do well. Now, those 6 happened to be pretty significant races.
Yeah,
4 of them were incumbents. So those that did win, they either had incumbency or they had a lot of money, which was John Curtis and Derek Brown. Derek Brown basically outspent his 2 competitors by 3x combined. So
by 3x combined, meaning
just blew him away as far as spend.
So if you take Rachel Terry, what she spent, and Frank Myler and what he spent 3 times as much as the combination of both of them.
Yes. Yeah. So he spent nearly $1 million, and each one of them were in the 100,000s range. Wow. So it's just way imbalance in that race as far as what spend was put into it.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to get together and have these conversations. Is a lot of people, because some of the big races were lost. But I kept saying, no, this is incredible. Like, this is absolutely incredible when you look at the numbers. And for me, I feel like and I'm probably a little biased there because it's what I watch, but the state legislature is a very important place to have
Mhm.
people that
Yeah.
have been our nominees and they came out of convention. And so, and I kind of want to dial it back and just ask you guys, what do you think are the positives of what our convention protects against, and maybe what we, and let's argue for the other side that, you know, what the public may want with signature gathering. And so I don't know how you guys, if you guys have evaluated, we're clearly all biased, so we appreciate
Right,
the caucus
yeah.
and convention system.
Well, I think if you ask the question, you know, because there's talk that we need to get rid of convention, right? So what does that landscape look like if we get rid of convention? What that means is it's money, right? So it's money to get on the ballot, and it's not a one-on-one talking to people and getting to know them. And so if we lose that, I mean, if you talk to probably everybody, they will complain about the money in politics
Mhm.
and the fact that our politicians lie to us, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Or that they're beholden to special interests
Like-
because
Right.
of the money.
Because of the money.
Yeah.
Okay. So on one hand, everybody says that it's the same problem.
Yeah.
And then they turn around and say, oh, well, because of the money,
Yeah.
I voted for this person, right? And the only antidote to that, I think, is caucus convention, because you are actually looking at people in the eye, talking to them. I mean, what other system is there where a sitting governor or a sitting US senator has the motivation to actually talk to some random person from your neighborhood?
Yeah.
Right.
And there's actually some data behind that as well. You know, that's one of the things I looked at is what were the candidates spending on signature gathering, right? And because there's, I think, this honestly a lie out there that signature gathering, oh, you're talking to people, you're going door to door. This is grassroots. You know, it's the candidate doing the slog and going out and talking to his neighbors and
Yeah.
seeing.
I
who's-
have heard that occasionally that does happen.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
Guess what? This
Occasionally.
time it didn't happen. At least the races that I looked at. So all of the federal races, all of the statewide races, the state level races, every single one of the signature gatherers that qualified for the ballot because of signature gathering paid for their signatures. So it absolutely is a money game.
Mhm.
And as someone who has participated in getting people to remove their signatures off a ballot, I can tell you for sure, people are not deeply thinking about what they sign.
Mhm.
They are
True.
not
Mhm.
taking serious consideration on whether that's something. And so this impression that, oh, because someone signed this
Mhm.
candidate petition, this infers some sort of like support or something that indicates this is a valid candidate. No, all it means is that happened to be the shortest path
Yeah.
for someone to end an awkward conversation on
Yeah.
their front porch and
Mhm.
to
Yep.
get on with their business because they didn't really want to talk to this person that came to their door to get a signature
Yeah.
signed.
Well, I have a family member that signed. It was, you know, two years ago for Mike. You know, it was the Mike Lee race. My family member signed for somebody who was running against Mike Lee, and I asked, "Well, I thought you were supporting Mike Lee. You know, all of our conversations have been very positive about Mike Lee." And it's like, oh, well, the nice young lady that came to the
Uh-huh.
door, right,
Yeah.
wanted me to sign, and it was cold outside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, so you invite that person in so that while you sign, and, you know, so it's not, oh, I really liked that other candidate. It's like, well, there's this poor, you know, college student that's trying to earn money, and I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
It's not just that either, because I mean, if you're looking at it realistically, and it's funny because we're sitting in a pest control company, right? But if you're looking at it and you're looking at, okay, you know, people going and knocking on doors and doing
Right.
door-to-door sales, right? I mean, this is what it is, right? It's a
Mhm.
door-to-door sale. You're just not paying with your money, you're paying with your signature. And the reality is that, yeah, if you go through any kind of sales training, it's, look, you build some rapport, you get to know them, you get to understand what their issues are. And then from there, I mean, they don't have any way of verifying that the person they're signing the petition for, or even the ballot initiatives, that those mean what you're telling them that they mean.
Absolutely.
And so at the end of the day, they're doing a sales job on you, right? And I'm not saying that these people are necessarily lying, though I have had people come to my door and lie to me about the candidates that they're knocking doors for, right? But I just happen to know because I'm involved, right?
Yeah.
But the issue is that they're not coming to the door and getting your signature because you're doing your civic duty. It's because it has actual value for those people.
Sure.
And that's why they're being paid to go get it.
Mhm.
And they're being trained to get those signatures. And so you are actually handing over something of value. And it's just as easy to look at them and tell them, I don't sign these kinds of petitions.
Mhm.
I'm going to save you the time. And that gets them off your porch just as fast.
Mhm.
Yeah, we had some of the candidates that were spending upwards and over $250,000 to
Mhm.
get on the ballot. $250,000
Yeah.
just to get your name on the ballot. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, on the statewide races, I would imagine it costs way more.
Yes.
And higher. Yeah.
Yeah. But on the flip side, if you're an average person running for office and you look at the scenario of what's the bar for entry, certainly at a lower level, like, state house or, county commission or something like that, you don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have, so we have this lovely system of government where it's government of, by, and for the people. And we love that idea that just any person off the street can come and be a representative.
Mhm.
And yet, if you get rid of caucus convention, that goes completely away. You have to have money, you have to have name recognition. And I'm a little jealous because all of you here know that I ran for school board, which doesn't go through the caucus convention system. I would have given anything because you start at ground zero. Nobody knows you. You have no money. You have to put, you're literally knocking doors. And again, there's a baseline that just to get people to know that you exist, let alone what you stand for, that there's even a name on the ballot, is a huge, huge ask for somebody who's never run for public office before and has a couple of kids at home and doesn't have the time to put in, right?
But, Wendy, I mean, I don't know if you've heard, but caucus, that is like an exclusionary club. It's hard to find out when it's happening. People don't want you there. They're going to be mean. They're all extremists there. So, what do we say to those criticisms of caucus?
I would say that you're dealing with human beings, right? So you're going to find everything everywhere, right? So if you want to, it makes me think of that old story about the old timer at the city, where they say, what's the city like? And he says, where did you come from? And he's like, oh, the people were horrible, this, and this. He's like, well, you're going to find that in this city. And then somebody else comes over and they're like, oh, they were the best people. I was really sad to have to leave. Well, you're going to find that in this city. You're going to find what you're looking for. And if what you're looking for are people who want to be informed and involved, you're going to find them. But within that framework of people who are informed and involved, you're going to find absolutely every color of person, right? Of perspective but that's what we want. Yeah. Because otherwise, one of the things that people complain about is the polarization in our society. When you stop talking to people, you have a polarized society. Mm-hmm. And everything that we're doing is putting people in silos, keeping them apart. Mm-hmm. And the people who are opposed to caucus are basically saying, there's got to be a better way where we don't actually talk to our neighbors. There's got to be a better way where we don't actually talk to the people that we want to have governance. Yeah. What? Yeah. There's a better way than actually engaging with people. Yeah. And you guys have heard this story before, but the way that you get rid of that polarization is to talk to people. And if people don't agree with you, that's all the more reason to talk to them and to find out where they stand. And caucus and convention allows for that. And it's a two-way street. Yeah. Because not only do you find out about the candidates, but the candidates, they're not going to know everything there is to know. And some of those delegates that they're talking to are going to know information that they don't know, and they can be informed. Yeah. And they will also maybe find out, oh, well, this person really knows a lot about this information, and I can get that information. Yeah. So I've shared this story before, but in 2016, Governor Herbert had been told that the only people who hated Common Core were a small vocal minority. It's always a small vocal minority in North Utah County, right? And North Utah County was abbreviated NUTCO. And so there was all of that, but we anti-Common Core moms, we were the crazy people. We just didn't want our kids to succeed and to have to work hard, right? And those of you that know me know that I am absolutely one of those moms that does not want my kids to succeed and work hard, right? So anyway, so Governor Herbert had been told this, and he believed it until convention, because he had gone around to every single county and talked to the random mom and the random dad in every single county, and realized that this was a much, much bigger issue than he had ever been led to believe by the echo chamber that was encircling him. And to the man's credit, instead of saying, oh, well, those people are still just crazy, he realized that he had been told something incorrect. Yeah. And instead of just doubling down, he invited some of us who, were probably some of his bigger critics on this policy to meet with him, and gave us 3 hours of his time and listened. And that is how you get rid of the polarization. Now, I don't think that in the end of everything that he agreed with me on everything, but he didn't have that, oh, well, you're a crazy extremist. It's like, no, I can actually see what you're saying is accurate and why you would be concerned about that. And I even might share some of your concerns with this aspect of it or that aspect of it, to the point that several years later in a state school board meeting, he basically said, whatever you believe about the people who are opposed to Common Core, what you cannot say is that they don't know what they're talking about and that they haven't done their homework, because they have. You may not agree with their conclusion, but they are well-read, they are well-researched, and they have legitimate concerns.
I think I actually won my first state delegate position because of Common Core, because that year I happened to be serving as a board member on a charter school board. And we were in the rounds of voting and stuff in our precinct, and the question came up about Common Core and stuff. And I'd kind of been in the middle of stuff. And so I was like, well, it was between voting. And so it was just kind of general informal discussions. Like, here's some things about Common Core you should kind of understand, and blah, blah, blah. Talked about a little bit. And next round of voting, man, I sailed right through because I was like, this guy knows about it. So that kind of helped me that time. And afterwards I was like, I kind of took an unfair advantage there because I was talking in between stuff about stuff.
You knew about it.
Well, one thing that I want to just add in, because I think your point segues neatly into, well, what are they? Just a bunch of extremists? They're just this or that or the other, right? And if you go to a caucus meeting, if you think that the convention was full of extremists, or if you think that the people who go to caucus are all just nut jobs, go to a caucus meeting. Yeah, because
it's all over the place.
Well, yeah. Well, that's my one point is just we had thousands of caucus meetings across the state, right? Yeah. And they all elected delegates, and so some of these folks, they seem to act like there's some kind of conspiracy to get these delegates elected. And when you show up, what happens is everybody's sitting there, and you tend to know a bunch of the people in your neighborhood. Yeah. And so what happens is everybody's looking at everybody else and going, okay, well, how are we going to do this? Yeah. And then we get down to the brass tacks of, okay, who's going to be a delegate, right? Who's going to be a county delegate? Who's going to be a state delegate? Who's going to be our precinct chair? And when you start doing that, I mean, my first time I showed up, I didn't know anything about anything, right? And so, and I was like, I'm just going to go see how it goes. Right. And, and then it's like, oh, we're electing these positions. I didn't even know that much when I showed up. Right. and I'm like, well, I'm just going to see how it goes. And then next time, if I want to be a delegate, I'll run. Right. And so we elect all of our county delegates and, and all of our state delegates and stuff. And we're getting down to voting for the precinct chair. And one of my neighbors gets up and he says, I would like to be the precinct chair, but I can't make it to the state convention. And that was a deal killer for everybody. So now everybody's looking around going, who can make the state convention? And one of my neighbors leans over and says, well, can you make it? And I looked at him and I said, well, yeah, but I've never done this before. And I got nominated right then to be the precinct chair. And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. right? And so I got elected the precinct chair and got involved, right? At the last caucus meeting for my caucus, I couldn't be there, right? I was sitting at Christie's table. I was answering phone calls because people were having issues with
We were the help desk.
registration. Right. We were the help desk.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's, okay, what do we do about this? What do we do about that? Right. And most of these things are, they're pretty common, easy to solve problems, but I couldn't be at my caucus meeting. And so I called up my precinct chair and I said, look, I want to be a state delegate because, I'm the county vice chair. And so I'm automatically a county delegate. And I said, I want to be a state delegate, but I can't be there. So can you just let people know? Because people there know who I am,
Mhm.
right? And then it turned out that Jake Anderegg, who is in my precinct, he was a state senator before, he also knows me. And so he stood up and he told people who I was, right? And so were we electing people because, hey, you hit the extremometer real good? No, we were electing people because we knew who they were,
Yeah.
right? People were, people who didn't know me voted for me because they knew Jake. People voted for Jake because they knew Jake. They voted for the other people because our precinct chair is on the city council, right? So people knew him. And so we're electing neighbors and friends who we know,
Yeah.
right? And so we're not trying to hit the extremometer or whatever, right? We're literally just electing our friends and neighbors who we trust represent our values to show up.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, it's not this, there's no conspiracy. There's no, you have to quote Reagan so many times to become a delegate, right? It's
Wendy does.
Not Reagan, it's Jefferson.
It's Jefferson.
Come on, let's be
Sorry,
honest,
Wendy.
right? It's
But-
Jefferson.
but my point is
She
that
loves
these are just regular people out of the neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
And
absolutely.
so at the convention, we had 4,000 and something people,
Yeah.
regular people out of the neighborhood
Yeah.
who their neighbors said, I trust him or I trust her.
Yeah.
And they sent us up,
which
right?
which also goes to the point. So a couple of things. Well, I wanted to mention on the having communications, like Wendy and I disagree on some things. And as we're driving, it's my favorite part of us driving. And also I had a moment, and I think Mac remembers this. Mac and I have one particular subject where we very much disagree on, and the whole world knows it. And we all went to dinner one night, and Mike was with us, and we had quite a few people there with us. Mike Kennedy was there. And anyway, I ended up sitting by Mac and his wife, and me and my husband were there. And we realized we had a lot of things in common. And I, not thinking, like blurted across the table, man, Mac, I like you much more than I thought I would. And I thought, hey, this is the beauty of having these conversations. And so a bunch of logical fallacies across the board have existed with caucus. And one of them that I wanted to point out is I answered this question a couple of times about whether or not we can vote absentee. Thank you for answering that. That for sure is true. And then
I didn't
also,
intend to, but you're welcome.
Yeah. The other thing is that we have these extremists or radical people. We had 72% new people there. And so, yes, you guys knew some of yours, and a lot of
Mhm.
these people were brand new, green as can be. And I still think they did a really good job. And having gone through the process, they went, wow. So we had a really cool thing happen. We had a training that we set up. So caucus happens. We say, we're going to have a training on Saturday. And we decide we're going to text them all, I think Friday, and tell them like, hey, get to Mountain View on Saturday. And on Saturday, we have somebody come up to us on the stage, and people just keep coming, and they just keep coming. If you guys remember, and then somebody says, you guys are going to have to delay the start 20 minutes because we have people all the way to the freeway who are trying to find a parking spot. And we end up convention numbers, 1,100 people, if I recall, at Mountain View.
Mhm.
They had the top layer. They had to open the doors.
We were trying to find somebody with a key to open
Yeah.
the top.
It was
what do you call it?
incredible.
Yeah.
And then I asked Kirby, how many of these people are new? And he goes, 72% are new. And so after we hold that event, we do a short training, then we had like the biggest meet and greet ever. It was awesome. I had a lady come up to me right after we're still on the stage, and she said, they were wrong. You guys aren't crazy at all. And I was like, yeah, because if you remember at the beginning of that, I started it with reading our mission statement, and our mission statement is beautiful. It says that we we appreciate and value everybody's inherent worth. We want what's best for our county. We want what's best for people. And I was like, and people clapped. And I think some of them were clapping like, wow, I actually like you guys more than we thought. Like I got the impression. And we would have to take a poll, and I would love to do this, about why people got involved and we had 72% new, because on average, you usually have 40 to 50% new.
Yeah.
So 72% is relatively high, but also kind of goes in line with the climate, the temperature of the day, how people are scared. And so you had people who were scared, green, came through the process, and were still willing to put 20 to 40 hours into vetting these people. We talked to one guy last night who told me he went to 3 meet the candidates in one day because he found out some of the federal ones were up in Salt Lake County, and then he came down to our county. And I said, do you feel like after going through that process, you know those candidates better than, say, if you just saw the flyers and the billboards? And he said, absolutely. But what they didn't know at the beginning was, what kind of questions should I ask? And so a lot of them walked around. They said, I'm just trying to vet character. It's really hard. There's a lot of people standing. Do I have specific questions? And that takes time, and that takes communication. And Wendy and I always talk about how hearts and minds, opinions are changed in small circles. Yeah. And so as these people sat around and talked, I saw this transition from the beginning of the process to the end, where they were talking about substance at the end. And so that's the stuff that you don't see. And so when we look at this of vetting 20 to 40 hours, when we know that the general public, and I'm not taking anything away from them, usually the motivator is civic duty for voting. And then I ended up at the end of our convention, I gathered all of the lost and found. So I ended up with some coats and some water bottles, and really funny, like I spread them on my counter and took a picture and posted it on social media. And then my son called and said, Mom, the black hoodie's mine. And so I'm like, sorry, pulled it out. But one of the things that somebody left behind was their binder. And I started going through this binder, and I was like, this is what it means to be a delegate. I went through this binder, and this guy had, 3-hole punch. This is like a regular big school binder. Every single flyer, he had written every candidate, questions that he wanted to ask them, things that he had heard. And so much time and energy had been put into this binder. And I thought, this is what it means. And then the other thing that I think is a total misnomer is that if you don't get a delegate seat, that you don't also have a voice within that system. And that's just not true. I know people who are like, I went to caucus, I didn't get elected, but I've been talking to my delegates still. And I still come to these things because I want them to know how I feel about certain candidates. And so they were still weighing in on the process.
Well, and you can go to meet the candidates. It's not like, we're looking for credentials. Are you a delegate? You can't come.
No, we want them.
Everybody there.
I'll shred my club card.
Yeah. Right. Well, we do want membership cards.
I think the aspect of this as well that is important to illustrate is the fact that, and this is applicable in other parts of life, and that is, 50% of winning something is showing up.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I've talked to many people that, have been bagging on the caucus convention system. And, many of them, I had a lot of conversations pre-caucus with these kinds of people. And I said, look, if you aren't seeing out of your precinct the kinds of delegates you want, go get 10 of your neighbors.
Yes.
Show up.
Yes.
You'll get a delegate seat. I guarantee, there are so many precincts that the competition for these seats just is not that significant.
Yeah.
You get enough of your neighbors that see things the way you do, share the values you have. And that is the core of what this is supposed to be about. So go get those people, show up to caucus night, get involved. But honestly, I feel like for many of these people, that's not what they want. They don't want to show up because they don't want to spend the time on it. They want the easy path of send me the ballot in the mail, let me check box the things that I recognize and send it back. And, because caucus and being involved in politics, that's too contentious. And that's just against my nature to be contentious.
Sure.
So,
and it's not everybody's cup of tea. And I think that's fine. And I think for some reason, certain people are drawn to certain things. And I would say that delegates tend to enjoy having some of these conversations that can get a little bit heated. And so I think that the only place where you ever change your mind is when you have those conversations. So you have to keep doing it. I think the number one criticism is that people will say, but caucus and convention don't get it right all the time. And that's true. We don't. They don't get it right all the time. But just like we talked to Jason Walton here earlier, I would say that we find people that we appreciate the things that they're saying, and that's a entry into the system. And I'm just saying, as we go through this process and we go, hey, we have some legislators that previously were grateful that they gathered signatures because they didn't make it out of caucus convention. And so do we get it right all the time? No, this is not a 100% system, but it is better. The question is, compared to what? And when we compare this to just open primaries where you're talking about money and name recognition versus people who really sit and have conversations, we do not get it right 100% of the time, but we get it right a lot of the time. And compared to any other system, I've yet to see a better system. And so when everybody criticizes, oh, but they got it wrong here, and it's like, okay, give me a better solution. No one has been able to offer up a better solution. Are there changes we can make? Absolutely. Are we looking at those? Absolutely. And we need to. With any system, we should. But the system is as good as the people willing to work it. Mm-hmm. And when people, like you say, I ran into a neighbor at Costco, and he said, I went to our caucus a couple of years ago, and I felt like the people did not reflect my position, same values. He thought they were a little bit out there. And I said, but didn't that mean to you that you were supposed to stay and they needed you more so that your neighborhood was reflective, balanced? Why didn't you get your friends and come? And he goes, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So
because that's the thing is if people are like, I don't want to go to that thing because it doesn't kind of fit with me and I didn't feel comfortable. It's like, okay, but by not being there, you are relinquishing, you are surrendering that to the other positions that you don't feel comfortable with. And so, yes, you need to be there because you want that full picture, that full spectrum of views and values within that precinct to be reflected in the delegates that are elected. Mm-hmm. That is where we get the best perspective of the whole party is when we do it that way. And then we can be more confident in what's coming out of convention to go, no, this was very representative of the whole party. Yeah. I think all of us here want that. We want that a lot.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, going back to Wendy's point, is that you have those conversations and people change their minds, right? And so you
on both
may,
sides, right?
Right. You
Both
may
sides.
be the impetus to changing the minds of some of the people at the caucus meeting, or you may be elected a delegate and change the minds of some of the delegates. And anybody who runs through the caucus convention system and doesn't take into account that the delegates are talking to each other as much as they're talking to the candidates,
certainly
you are going to lose out on some pretty critical stuff. But the other thing is that it goes the other way too, where some of the things that kind of get taken for granted as positions in the caucus convention system amongst the delegates may change your mind.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had that happen. I've talked people around to stuff that I believed, and I've had people come and talk to me, and I had never thought about it that way before. Absolutely. And I don't walk away going, I definitely agree with them now. But after a few weeks of thinking about it, I do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or maybe I come 80% of the way. And one thing that I've seen a lot of is I've seen a lot of people come in and basically going, I keep hearing that these people are nutty, but not in my neighborhood. Right.
Yeah.
And so then they start having those conversations, and they become more conservative. I see that a lot with the delegates. Right. Yeah. And it's because they are having those conversations, right? And it's a safe place. People talk about the contention, but when you're just talking about where you're coming from and what you're concerned about with the candidates, it's a pretty safe conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
And when you have those kinds of conversations, that's where the minds change, right? Because then I'm not trying to win the argument with Mac because I disagree with him on something, right? I'm just talking about why I like Phil Lyman and why maybe he doesn't like that same aspect of him, right? And so we have a friendly conversation, and then I have to go home and think about it.
And I voted for Phil.
I do too. But the point is that that's where the change happens. And I see so many people that they come in thinking that they're moderate and walk out realizing that they were conservative the whole time and that they just hadn't been pushed on some of this stuff.
Well, I think one of the aspects of that you touched on, the people you've seen people get more conservative, and I think and that's why I'm not afraid of inviting moderates to come to caucus, because even if they become a delegate, guess what? Yeah. The dirty little secret is they will get more conservative because they're a delegate.
Yep.
And why is that? Because Well, there's this perception, and the media tries to play this like, oh, the body of the party doesn't match the delegates because we had this difference between convention and what the primary came out with. It's like, okay, well, that's not necessarily a surprise because there is a large group of people. I'm not going to say everybody. There's a lot of regular Republicans that do a lot of research that are not delegates, that are very well informed, but there is a large body of them that their views on things I like to call kind of squishy. Like they kind of have this very broad view of things, and they haven't really had the opportunity to solidify those opinions into specific policy questions. And I see what happens is they come in as a delegate, they're kind of squishy, and then all of a sudden they realize, I've got to ask an intelligent question of candidates. What am I supposed to ask? And so they're like, oh, I better go research some stuff so I don't look stupid in the questions I ask at the meet and greets. And then what happens? Oh, they become more informed. They research the issues. They dig a little deeper, and they get more conservative because they have to now solidify their opinions from squishy into more specific. And so to me, it's not that the body politic of the party is necessarily more moderate. They just haven't had the opportunity to really have to solidify what does it really mean in their opinion? Where do they actually really stand instead of like, oh, I kind of like John Curtis. He's a nice guy.
Well, the thing that I want to point out, though, is that because I think some people are going to look at that and go, oh, well, you totally changed their values. No, actually, no, right? I think generally in Utah, we live by a lot of the same principles, right? And we hold a lot of the same values. And so when they're solidifying their stance, they're not changing their values. They're figuring out where these issues align with their values.
Yes.
Yep. I would also point out that, people assume that because the primary election is different, that, we got it wrong. But I had quite a few people in my neighborhood, friends and stuff, who voted for a particular candidate a handful of years ago that I didn't vote for. And it was very obvious, that I was here and I went out and their candidate won and mine did not. And the number of people that came back and said, I really regret that vote. I wish I had listened to you, right? Now, it wasn't everybody. It might not have even been a majority, but it was enough that there were individuals that felt like, I'm so disappointed that this is what I believed about this candidate. They go off, this is our argument, right? Everybody goes off to DC or to Salt Lake, and then they come back and they're different. And what they ran on isn't what they govern by, right? And I was just like, yeah, and that we saw that. I could have told you that, right? I kind of tried to, but it was an overwhelming number of people that it was very surprising to me that came back and said, I should have listened. So that voter regret can go, it can be at convention. It can, and the other thing that's important to understand is people are human. These candidates are human. And I like to joke, how many perfect people have ever run for public office? And I can say this because I have run and won public office. 0 public, office holders have ever been perfect. And 0 public office holders will ever be perfect. So it's a balance of, I appreciate this about this person more than I appreciate this. And this person's really strong over here, and this person's really strong over here. And I'm balancing in that prioritization of which is more important for this office. I might very well vote for somebody for this office where I feel like they wouldn't be as good for this office, right? And that nuance exists. And when you're getting, ads and things like that, that's harder to filter through. But when you're looking at someone face to face, you kind of get a better sense of, well, you just didn't know anything about public lands. That, that was one. It's like, how are you trying to represent, this area if you've never looked into that issue, right? And maybe that's not as big of an issue for other people. But those are the decisions that we're asking. And I find it interesting that when people complain, it's like, yeah, they didn't live up to what what I thought.
Yeah. My number one question when they complain is, did you go to caucus?
Yeah.
Well, one
Did
other
you
thing I
run as
want
a
to point
delegate?
out is that as a delegate, I've had conversations with people where it's just like, well, they're mostly okay, but there's something wrong there, right? And I'll hear it from multiple delegates about the same candidate,
Sure.
right? And it's because
Oh.
we're in the same room, we're breathing the same air.
Yeah.
And then it comes out later that there was something wrong there, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And you do not get that at all
Yeah.
if you're not in the same room with these people.
Yeah.
Certainly not from a TV ad.
Yeah.
Not from a TV.
So one
ad.
thing I would love to do is to come back and I want to look at one of the races that was, I think for many people was a real disappointment within the party, and that was the governor's race
Mhm.
between Spencer Cox and Phil Lyman,
Mhm.
and kind of look at that and analyze that a little bit, because I think people look at that and it's like, oh, that was such a disappointment. But if you really look at the numbers, like, we actually did pretty well in that campaign.
Incredible.
Especially, so one aspect to look at it, and we go back to those drivers of what influences the chances of being able to win a primary. Governor Cox had two big things going for him. Incumbent, strong, probably the strongest incumbency advantage in any race because of being a statewide governor. Then the spend, he outspent Phil Lyman's campaign, doubled them. Phil Lyman's campaign spent just over $1 million. The governor spent $2.1 million in his campaign. So vastly outspent them. But then if you look at the results numbers, there was a less than a 10% difference in the results as we see them right now. Smallest gap of winning of any incumbent governor we've had. Like,
Really?
it's like, wow, like
Yeah.
what? Yeah.
Ever?
Every governor, well, as far as we've looked back.
Okay. Fair enough.
We'll say in probably the last 20 years.
Okay.
And so, to say you won by less than 10% as an incumbent governor in your primary, that's got to be, I mean, honestly, if Governor Cox is not looking at that going, I should probably take some deep looks at this, he's not looking at it straight.
Right.
Some other things that we looked at as well is we went and we looked at the donations that came into those two campaigns, the Cox campaign and the Lyman campaign. And one of the things that popped out to me very, very quickly was those small donations. And that kind of can be an indicator of like, what is your broad-based support amongst common people? And that's those donations, $100 or less, because, certainly the top line donations, which are big, they're huge, they're really the ones that drive the campaign. They're the ones that actually bring the most money in, that is really what provides the revenue to make a campaign run. And those smaller donations, they're, as a bulk of the overall income for a campaign, they're really the smallest part of it. They're kind of a skip, but they are, in my opinion, a great indicator of what is the grassroots support of these campaigns. So if we look at those, the Cox campaign, they had 560 donations in that $100 and less category. Lyman campaign, 1,976.
Wow.
So a significant disparity in the number of people that are willing to pull out their wallet and put money on the table to say, I really want this guy to win. So I think that's a pretty big indicator of, how those campaigns really kind of settled out.
I thought it was interesting just looking at the signage.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah. Me
yeah.
too. Me too.
Right?
Me too.
Because if you're going to put a sign in your yard, you're committed, right? Everything else is just kind of,
They're squishy.
It's squishy. But where were you seeing the signs? You've got the billboards, and that's general. You've got the TV ads, and that's general. But where did you see the signs? And that's what it kind of tells you, kind of that grassroots number matches.
Yeah, it's funny too, because so my wife grew up in Emory County, so in Huntington, which is right by Castledale, and my father-in-law still lives down there. And so, and lately, my brother-in-law's been in town, so he's been driving up here, right, because he's staying with my sister-in-law in Heber. And after like the second or third time he drove through Spanish Fort Canyon, he sent me a text, and he basically said, "Does anyone have Cox signs out?" And then he also pointed out, nobody ever put signs up over Spanish Fort Canyon. And there are Lyman signs all over up here,
Yeah.
up by Strawberry Reservoir and stuff. And he's like, I just don't see how Cox can win. Now, obviously there are other factors that played, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, it was everywhere.
Yeah. So I thought, we had a moment for those of us who were at the state convention, like at about 10:30 that night. I looked across the
It's
room.
a blur after like 8.
It was a long day.
Very
I
long
call it
day.
the 17-hour club, but we've never had that. Like we've always been out of there by 4, 5, 6 at the latest. So anyway, at about 10:30, I looked across the room and I texted Rob and I said, do you see this? Like, I mean, I know that they had factors of why they couldn't move on, but I said, this is a beautiful thing. Like if I know everybody's tired, but there was a couple that was behind us. Yeah. That had their baby and they had snacks and they had been, and they had a small child and both the husband and wife were delegates. And I looked across the room and I was like, no one's leaving. No one's moved. This is civic duty. This is people, it'll make me tear up, but they care about what's going on right now because they're scared. And they came and they stayed for 17 hours.
Mhm.
Like it was awesome. So obviously I feel it deeply that this system and these people want representative government. And so, they stood there, they sat there, they were, food closes because it's a business. Water was tough to get. And they sat there and they said, we're going to stick this out until the very end. And so, yeah, it matters. Do we get it right all the time? No. Is it our system? Yeah, it's our system. We're a private party. We want to represent our neighbors. We want to get together with like-minded people and come together and say, these are our values. And we want to send people that we think have those values who are willing to have the courage and put it on the line. It's not easy being a candidate. Like my hat is off to all of those people, man. Some of them toured the entire state, some of them every day they were somewhere else. And it is not easy. And they get grilled too. So not only are they putting their time, their money, and they get grilled, and they take it, and it's awesome. And I thought this time we had a lot, especially in those top 2 races of candidates, but we had awesome people willing to do it because people are scared, right? There's a lot of fear out there right now, and for good reason. And so the best place that they can go, and I have thought this ever since, our leadership team got elected, is their party. They're going to look to their party. And if we don't have stuff in place and if we're not sure how to bring them in and bring them into the process and show them how this works, we will have failed them. And so I don't think we've failed them. I think we've done a good job.
Yeah, I think this leads into kind of the next question. And that is, okay, so we kind of see the factors that go into how people, make it through the convention, make it through the primary. Like what do we do different next time? Right. And specifically, I think I want to get more into like, how do we get more people involved?
Yeah.
And then the other question is how do we make it work the best way possible to get the best candidates through and then support them through a primary in general?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that we have to realize, there's the old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
Right. So we definitely want to continue to make caucus and convention more welcoming, more accessible. This last round, I think we had done more than we ever had in the past.
Yes.
To make it, if you actually wanted to participate in caucus, there was a way to do it. Are there more things we can do better? Absolutely. We had some problems with the data systems we were using. We'll get that fixed. It will be better. We're looking at a number of things from the state level and also with Precinct Portal that I run, as how do we make it so people can declare ahead of time? Maybe a week before they can say, I'm going to run for precinct chair. I'm going to run for state delegate or county delegate, to allow for a better breadth of, vetting from your community members. I am 100% in support of that. I think that would be a great thing to do. Now, we can build all the tools in the world, but if people don't use them, they're only good as people coming to and actually doing it. But I think there will continue to be this narrative out there that we need to have good talking points and our own counter narrative to battle against. And that is, caucus convention is exclusionary. The people there are radicals, they're extremists, that is going to continue. There's always going to be that opposition because, we are pressing against power. We are pressing against, the established way of things are doing. And there are powerful people that don't like that. And so there will continue to be big money and big messaging against caucus. And I think we just have to continue to work as a team, as a party, to have our best counter arguments as to why that's not true, and to take that argument to our community members and our neighbors to say, no, that's not really how it is.
Yeah.
You are welcome. We want you to be there. We want you to participate. I think that's one of the things we have to continue to work on.
Mm-hmm. We know a year in advance the date.
Right.
And so people know a year. And I offered this last night, and I'm going to offer it again. I'm happy to pay for anybody's babysitting if that's their obstacle to attending. Some people say they can't get a babysitter. They have to work. You have a year in advance to know. And I think it is super valuable to meet in person. And so I think we need to continue to meet in person. People should know they can, if they're out, absentee, they're welcome to do that. And then just this idea that numbers equate to the value of a system. That's just a logical fallacy. That's not true. We had good numbers. We had 100,000 people show up for the presidential preference poll caucus this year. That's an enormous amount.
That was statewide, right?
It's statewide. Yeah. And so if you're looking at the number of people, that's not what's an indicator of a good system. We've all heard the expression, like a great idea whose time has not come. We're a great idea whose time has come, and also experiences the ebbs and flows of regular political environments. And I think we're doing fantastic, but they will say, how do we get, because more people don't get involved? And I say, I don't know if you remember, but like, we believe in freedom, and some people, this isn't their thing and they don't want to come. And so making people or forcing people, or how do we get people, anybody who's welcome to come, our job is to make sure that the barrier to entry is as minimal as possible, and that the door is always open for those who want to participate. And I think we do a decent job of that. I think the state did a really good job of that this year. Like
Sure.
Maybe it's the things that I look at, but everywhere I went, they were advertising where and how, and, pre-register. And I felt like they gave a ton of support to getting it out. I had a funny situation where I met with a precinct chair and vice chair that had a lot of these exact same concerns that we're talking about here. And we were at a Costa Vida up in Saratoga, and one of the workers who was cleaning off the tables had been, overhearing what we were saying, and he was a self-admitted political junkie. And he pulled up a chair. He said, "Do you guys mind if I join you really quick?" And I said, "No."
Those are the best.
Yeah, he was adorable. And he said, "I just wanted to let you know, I went to caucus for the first time this year, and these two that I was talking to had just gotten through telling me that their neighbors didn't know, and it was too hard of a system to access. They didn't know when and where they should go."
Yes.
And this adorable kid that was probably 19 said, "Oh, I heard about caucus on the news, so I looked it up and I went to my local school." And I was like, "Oh, so it wasn't hard?" He goes, "No, it was super easy."
Yeah.
So I went, well, there goes that narrative. So
And one thing to go off of what you mentioned there about the numbers and like, oh, that discrepancy and how many people are showing up to caucus and therefore it's not legitimate. It's like, you could extend that same argument to our primary. How many people vote in a primary compared to general? Well, are we going to say primary sucks? We should get rid of the primaries because not enough people to participate. That's a ludicrous idea. That's a ludicrous proposition. So how can we turn around and use that same argument to say caucus convention is illegitimate?
Well, the other thing I'm just going to point out is, even if you didn't get the memo a year in advance as to what day it was, it's always at the beginning of March.
And it's always on a Tuesday.
And it's always on a Tuesday. And it's all you have to do is look it up, right?
Yeah.
If you really wanted to go,
yeah.
like you're saying, it's not that hard to figure out.
Yeah.
And sure, would we love to put out more signs? Would we love to get flyers on every? Yes. But reasonably, logistically, that's really hard. And so we do the best we can to get the word out as best we can. But yeah, if you're sitting around in February and you're going, oh, it's an election year, go find out when caucus is.
Go. Yeah. And I noticed last night we had a meeting and we had everybody raise their hands on who canvassed, who put out signs. And did you guys see? It was like the majority of the room, and we had a huge room. And so that's 72%. And like what Mac was saying, we welcome moderates, people who think that they disagree with us, because I actually think that this turnaround with the 72% new delegates gave us, after they went through the process, people who were willing to take action and were more passionate by the end of the whole system. And who there has been this big dip in the summertime where people kind of go away and people get saying, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? And I go, oh, wow, you guys are ready to keep going. And we will, because we have the general, and, we went through the primary and people have this idea. I like to think of it kind of as we had a family meeting. And we had some disagreements. And so, we came out of this family meeting and we're working out where we're at. And we're still grateful for our good Republican members who are willing to uphold our platform and our principles. I'm grateful for them. And so, it's been exciting. It continues to be. So.
One aspect of the party that I see improving, and I've seen this improvement over the years as well, and that is the funding of the party, because, it takes money to get this stuff done. It takes money to run an effective caucus night statewide.
Oh, yeah.
It takes money to be able to run good conventions. It takes money to, empower that grassroots pre-primary so that, this workforce of delegates in the party can go out and make a difference for our convention winners. So that's one of the aspects that as a party, we need to continue to push on. We need to continue to find and perfect that aspect of how do we keep that engine running of getting those donations in so the party can be as effective as it can.
Right.
And I highlight that because, we just looked at all this money going into campaigns, and we also have to talk about, the one thing we have to continue to push on and do better as a party to battle against that is also a money game. Yeah. It's also fueling the party, making it so it has that revenue and resources to be that influence in those races so that, the grassroots voice continue to be there.
Well, I would add to that because, again, if you're looking just at special interest money, right? So if we get rid of, because you hear a lot of people talk about, it's the problem is the parties, right? Okay, if you get rid of the party process, what you are left with is special interest money. And what special interest that's getting what they want is going to run a candidate against their guy that's giving them what they want, right? So, again, take a look at the UEA. Okay, the UEA is funding certain candidates, right? They're not going to fund multiple candidates in a race, right? Club for Growth, whatever it is, they're not, if they've got somebody in office that they like, they're going to keep funding them.
Yeah.
And what the parties are bringing to this is the ability for every single person who shares our party platform values to be able to have an impact. It's the lever, it's that leverage that we can have an impact. We may not always win against the special interests, but but is it better to have, a couple of people, discussing and debating ideas of what's the best policy? Or is it just better to have special interests say, yeah, well, we like it this way? Tax increment financing, for example. Do we want to give tax breaks to big businesses? Well, if I'm the big business, then the answer is, of course, yes. So, but who's on the other side of that discussion saying, well, isn't that government picking winners and losers? Is that a really good idea? It's the parties that are doing that. And it's the only organization that is motivated by principle. And because Christy mentioned, you have to have the Jefferson quote. Thomas Jefferson said, in matters of principle, or in matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of style, or matters of principle, stand like a rock. And that's what the party does, is it says, these are our principles. These are the overriding things: freedom, inalienable rights, protection of those inalienable rights by government. Those are the principles. How we get there, those are the style. That's the swim with the current, right? And we might have different ways of doing that. And that's what we're hoping these debates are getting us to, is who's firm on the principles, who's standing strong, and where is it a question of style where we can go, oh, well, that's okay over there.
That exact argument is why I hope it will appeal to our very good legislators, who most of them came their entry into the system was through the caucus system.
Right.
And so I've yet to find one when I ask, how did you get involved in politics, that any of them say anything other than I went to caucus, 10 years ago, 15 years
Right.
ago.
Mhm.
And so that is the exact reason, although, and we have a pledge on our website that I hope and pray that they will take a look at and sign, because it is essentially is that if you recognize that the party is the anchor for these things, regardless of what style you want to swim in, and regardless of if you've used signatures or if you like that path, we're just saying, keep this anchor in place and say that you're not going to touch it.
Well, one thing I would like to add to what Wendy said is, it's not just that we're going to stand firm on these principles today. It's that the party has done this for years and will continue to do this, right? And so you're going to see politicians you like come and go. You're going to see politicians you don't like come and go. You're going to see people in the party come and go. But the reality is we need the party to keep us anchored over time, so that, as these 6 come in and these 8 go out, that we're still heading in the right direction, right? It's an anchor, but it's a compass, right? And it's a compass that we can use over and over and over and over again, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Which was what part of the, trying to attach us to certain candidates this time and say, you are all like this, you all want this individual or this individual. And that's just simply not true.
No.
It's the platform.
That's the platform.
Yeah. What are the principles?
One last thing before we wrap up, I know we're getting long here, but that I wanted to mention to kind of illustrate that because there's still this question, does convention still have influence? Does that still have some power? And it does. And one of the stats that comes out to me on that helps illustrate this is we talked very much about this power of incumbency and how hard it is to overcome incumbency. And that's very true. That's a super powerful thing to have and to wield. But none of the candidates that got on the ballot via signature gathering overcame an incumbent. But we had 5 convention winners that overcame incumbents out of convention. So it does show you. Now, did it happen all the time? No, but it does happen sometimes. And so there is still, some power in that caucus convention process, and it still does wield some stuff. It's got some very other powerful thing it's always going up against. I think as a party, we want to continue to maximize our impact in helping our convention winners. But, and the other thing I will say as well is, as you look at the stats also, is we really struggle at the top of the ticket when it comes to caucus convention winners. But down ballot, those state house races, state senate races, state school board races, we're killing it. We're doing super well as convention nominees in those races. So,
and some of them went up against a lot of money.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And still came out.
Yeah.
So that was really good. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah. I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it up like I do on my other podcasts, and just let people know you can go find the podcast. It's on YouTube, on the UCRP channel. I've started posting them to Facebook as well, so that people can find it on our Facebook page. And that's Utah County Republican Party. I need to start posting them to Twitter, but they're also on our website, and that's at ucrp.org. And that's got a whole bunch of other information too about how the caucus convention system works and who your representatives are and how to get involved in the party.
And the caucus booklet.
And the caucus booklet and the caucus booklet. Oh, and also the caucus booklet. So go check that out.
And was there a caucus booklet?
There is, and
Yeah,
it's on the state party website as well, which is utgop.org. But yeah, and go check it out, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't know until I read it. I was like,
The pledge is there too right now?
yes.
And anybody can sign it. So even if you are a delegate or not a delegate or a house chair, or anybody can sign it and they can send it in, and we'll put your name up there. So
Yeah, it's also useful because I've looked at some of the people who haven't signed it and then encouraged some of my legislators to sign it. So,
Yeah. Thank you.
But yeah, I think the real hub is ucrp.org. But I mean, go find us wherever we are.
Yeah. Thank you guys for all the service that you do for the party, because it
Thank
is
you.
not easy, and it's a lot of time and a lot of energy, and we have an awesome team. So appreciate you.